You ever do something dumb on Halloween because it sounded fun? But then halfway through you're like, yeah, we're not making it out of this alive? That was me, my cousin Jake, and our friend Maya, Halloween night 2021. We were 16, bored and looking for trouble. The good kind, not the kind that makes you scream for your life. There was this abandoned psychiatric hospital just outside town, in a place called Elmridge. It had been closed since the 1980s. People said it was haunted, obviously. Every town's got one of those places. But this one, it was different. For years, teens had been breaking in, tagging the walls, drinking, blasting music, doing the usual. It was kind of a tradition. But by the time we got interested, the town had finally had enough. The place was locked down tight. Every window on the first floor was covered in thick steel bars. Security guards were patrolling the grounds every Halloween. They even blocked off the front entrance with metal sheets and chains, but we still wanted in. We'd heard stories about the sixth floor, how no one ever made it up there and stayed long. Rumors of weird noises, cold spots, shadows that moved when no one else did. Stupid stuff, right? Wrong. We didn't go in through the front like idiots. Jake knew a trail through the woods that led to the back of the hospital. Took us about 15 minutes of tripping over roots and whispering to each other like we were in some horror movie. When we got to the fence, we could already hear some security guards yelling on the other side of the building. That was our cue. We climbed over the rusted chain-link fence and dropped down into the overgrown grass. It was darker than dark back there. No streetlights, just the moon which barely peeked through the clouds. We started searching for a way in. Every single window was sealed shut with thick bars. It was like the building didn't want us in. But then Maya spotted something. A boarded-up window just barely high enough to reach, and instead of metal bars, it was covered with old, rotting wood. Jackpot. We had boots on, so we figured we could kick it in. But it was way too high to reach with just our feet. So Jake and I did the dumb thing. We lifted Maya up like she was a human battering ram, boots first. She kicked the planks with all her weight, and after a few good hits, the wet, moldy wood split apart with a crunch. She climbed in first, then Jake and I followed. Inside, it smelled like damp, rotten dust and something else. Like old meat. Not fresh, just lingering. I grabbed a wide piece of plywood lying nearby and shoved it back over the window from the inside. We didn't want anyone to know we were in there. And just like that, we were alone in a dead, rotting asylum. Jake had brought 3 flashlights. Thank God. There were piles of junk everywhere, busted chairs, broken tiles, old papers soaked in mildew. We crept through the first floor, whispering and trying not to step on anything that would make noise. The plan was to reach the roof. We figured that would be the best view, and probably where people tagged stuff. Jake also brought a couple cans of spray paint in case we wanted to leave our mark. Yeah, smart priorities, I know. We found a stairwell that still looked solid and started climbing. The place groaned with every step. After what felt like forever and probably at least 10 flights, we made it to the 6th floor. That's when things changed. We stepped into a hallway and the air suddenly felt heavy, like it was pushing down on our shoulders. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was thick, smothering. We hadn't seen or heard anyone else in the building since we came in, but just as we started looking for a way up to the roof, we heard it. This loud metallic bang from further down the hall. All 3 of us froze. We turned our flashlights toward the sound, but the hallway stretched on too far. The light just vanished into the dark. Maybe it's a pipe, Jake whispered. Maya shook her head. Nope, that wasn't a pipe. We agreed to go the other way. No use walking toward a scary noise. But even as we moved, I kept glancing behind us. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. Then it happened. We turned a corner and I heard a creak behind me. I spun around with my light, and I swear on my life someone was peeking around the hallway corner watching us. Just a pale, narrow face. But when my light hit them, they ducked away like they'd been burned. I yelled out, but I couldn't tell if I was calling to them or just shouting to my friends. Jake and Maya came back to check, but there was no one there. They asked if I was joking. I wasn't. We kept going, and eventually we reached a hallway where most of the floor had collapsed. There was just a thin strip of floor left, barely wide enough for one person to cross. Below it was what looked like an old bathroom, smashed up and filthy. Maya volunteered to go first. She braced her shoes against the wall and grabbed a pipe running along the upper part of the hallway for balance. Then Jake went. I went last. Halfway across, something yanked on the back of my shoe. At first I thought Jake was playing a sick prank, but he was already across. There was no one down there. No way anyone could have gotten under me that fast. I couldn't see anything. I was holding onto the pipe with both hands, my flashlight was in my pocket, and all I could feel was fingers, cold fingers, grabbing at my ankle. I screamed. Loud enough to rattle the walls. My friends rushed back and shined their lights down into the hole, and the second the light hit, the grip vanished. We heard footsteps below, fast ones running off into the dark. We didn't look. We didn't want to see. We ran down the stairs. Fast as we could. We didn't stop until we hit the first floor. But then we realized, we had a problem. We didn't remember where the window was. There was only one window we came through, and we'd covered it. Now every hallway looked the same. Peeling wallpaper, shattered glass, and that awful, awful silence. We started running through the halls, calling to each other, checking every corner. That's when I saw it again. We turned down another hallway, and at the far end, just barely visible in the beam of my flashlight, was him. This time half his body was visible, the other half hidden behind the wall. But now he was wearing something, a mask. White, cracked porcelain, no mouth, just two black holes where the eyes should be. He didn't move. I stopped cold. Jake and Maya froze too when they saw where I was pointing. We turned around and ran. I don't think we even spoke. Just full panic. Sprinting until our legs felt like jelly. And finally we found it. The boarded-up window. We ripped off the cover and scrambled out like rats escaping a trap. Outside, everything felt different. The noise was gone. Security had cleared most of the people out. The wind was colder. The trees looked taller. Even the stars felt wrong. We could have gone to a guard, told them someone was in there. Someone dangerous. But we didn't. We were too scared of getting caught. Or worse, being forced to explain what we saw. We ran through the woods, all the way back to Jake's car, and sat in silence for a long time. The rest of the night, we just hung out in an empty parking lot, trying not to talk about it, pretending we were fine, but none of us were. We didn't sleep much after that. Even now, we don't really talk about it. But sometimes when it gets late and quiet, I think about those hands grabbing my ankle, and that face watching us from the dark. And I wonder, did he ever leave? Okay, so this happened back in 2003, in a quiet little town called Cedar Knoll. I was 10 years old that year, and it was the first Halloween my older cousin Tyler and I were allowed to go trick-or-treating without any grown-ups tagging along. We'd been begging our parents for weeks, and they finally gave in. As long as we stayed together and came back by 9 p.m. sharp, we were good to go. Tyler was 12 and already acting like he was 20. He told me we'd hit up every house on Maple Street first because the rich people always give out the full-size candy bars. He was kind of a candy genius, so I followed his lead. The night started off great. The air was chilly but not too cold, and there were carved pumpkins glowing on every porch. Kids in costumes ran up and down the sidewalks, and the sound of laughter and crunching leaves filled the air. It felt like the perfect Halloween. But then we reached the end of the street where the houses got farther apart and a little off, like less decorations, dimmer lights. One house stood out, sitting by itself behind a bunch of overgrown hedges. It had this rusted black mailbox and a front porch that creaked when the wind hit it. No pumpkins. No decorations. Just a porch light flickering like it hadn't been replaced in years. Tyler pointed. Let's check it. Could be one of those hidden gems, I wasn't so sure. The place looked like it belonged in a horror movie. But I didn't want to look like a baby, so I followed him up the cracked stone path. We rang the doorbell. There was a long pause. Then we heard shuffling, like feet dragging slowly across wood. The door creaked open, and standing there was a man who looked off. He was probably in his 60s with messy gray hair and these tiny eyes that didn't blink. He wore a wrinkled brown cardigan and had yellow stains on his shirt, like he'd been eating mustard with his fingers. He smiled, but not in a nice way. More like the kind of smile you'd see on a ventriloquist dummy. "Trick or treat," we said, our voices kind of awkward. The man leaned on the doorframe and tilted his head. "Well now," he said slowly, "what are you two dressed as?" Tyler said he was a zombie baseball player, and I said I was a pirate. The man chuckled, but it was a dry, wheezy sound like someone trying to breathe through dust. He looked behind us, scanning the street. "No parents tonight?" Tyler said nope. The man nodded like he liked that answer way too much. "Well," he said, "I've got something real special for brave trick-or-treaters, but you gotta earn it." He stepped back and waved us in. "I built a little haunted tunnel. You get to the end and you get the good candy." Tyler raised an eyebrow. "Like, inside your house?" The man smiled again, wider this time. "It's just in the front room. Nothing scary. Promise." Something about his voice made my skin crawl, but Tyler was already nudging me forward. "Come on, it'll be fine." We stepped inside and the door creaked shut behind us. The front room was dark, lit only by strings of dim orange lights twisted through fake spiderwebs. The air smelled weird, like rotting apples and old clothes. In the middle of the room was the tunnel he mentioned, a long winding crawl space made out of cardboard boxes, duct tape, and trash bags. It was taller than I expected and curved around the furniture like a snake. "Candy's at the end," the man said, standing perfectly still behind us. "Just crawl through." Tyler went first. I followed, my knees crunching on the cardboard floor. Inside, it was darker than it looked from the outside. The only light came from tiny slits in the boxes. Everything felt tight and cramped, and the air was heavy like there wasn't enough of it. As we crawled, the tunnel got weirder. The walls started shaking slightly, like someone was tapping on the outside. A cold breeze hit my neck even though we were indoors. And then I heard it, whispering. Soft, slow, impossible to make out, but definitely there. "Did you hear that?" I whispered to Tyler. He didn't answer. He just kept crawling. The tunnel opened up into a tiny room made from more boxes. There was a piece of paper taped to the wall with crooked letters scrawled in red marker. "Candy, downstairs." A door beside the sign creaked open on its own, revealing narrow wooden stairs leading into darkness. A single orange light bulb flickered at the bottom. Tyler stood up and looked down the stairs. "He's really committed to the haunted house thing, huh?" I hesitated. Something deep in my gut told me we shouldn't go any further. I grabbed his arm. "Maybe we should just go." Then we heard the front door open upstairs. Footsteps. Someone else had entered the house. The man didn't say anything. The silence was worse than any sound. Then, slam. The door above the stairs slammed shut and we both jumped. Tyler ran up the stairs and tried the door. Locked. He pounded on it. "Hello? Hey, let us out." I started crying. I couldn't help it. It felt like we were trapped in a box buried underground. We stopped when we heard footsteps again, this time coming down the stairs. Slow, one at a time. But no one appeared. Just the sound of feet. Then the lights flickered and went out. Everything went pitch black. And then the whispering came back. Louder this time, closer. It felt like it was right behind my ear. I screamed. Tyler was yelling too, banging on the door, kicking it, trying anything to get out. I could barely breathe. Then we heard another voice. A woman's voice, shouting from upstairs, "Hey, what are you doing?" A man shouted too, "Open that door right now." Suddenly the lock clicked. The door flew open and light poured in. Two people stood at the top of the stairs, a man and a woman, probably in their 40s. The woman rushed down and grabbed us both, pulling us into a hug. Her hands were shaking. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" We shook our heads, too stunned to speak. They led us upstairs. The old man stood in the corner of the room staring at us. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stared, like he was watching something that wasn't there. The couple didn't say a word to him. They just took us outside and walked us across the street to their house. The husband called the police while the wife made us sit down with warm blankets and hot cocoa. She asked us gentle questions. Did he say anything weird? Did he touch you? Did you see anyone else in the house? We told them everything. Apparently, they had seen us go into his house from their living room window and thought something didn't feel right. When they noticed we didn't come out after 10 minutes, they decided to check on us. The cops arrived not long after. They stormed the man's house, and when they came back out, one of them looked pale. They wouldn't tell us everything, but the couple later said the police found a lot of messed up stuff in that basement. Chains, dolls with missing eyes, candy with things hidden inside, and something about a hidden room under the floor. They took the man away in handcuffs that night. We never saw him again. Tyler and I didn't talk much about it after that. But I still have nightmares sometimes, about crawling through that tunnel and hearing something breathing just behind me. And every Halloween since, I stay away from the houses with no decorations and porch lights that flicker, because you never know who's really waiting behind that door. I've never really liked Halloween. Ever since I moved out on my own after college, it just hasn't felt the same. As a kid, sure, it was all about costumes and candy and running around with friends. But now it just means strangers ringing, my doorbell nonstop, and kids trampling across my yard like it's a playground. The place I live in now, Elmbrook, is quiet most of the year. It's a small town in upstate New York, surrounded by woods and long stretches of two-lane roads that feel a little too empty after dark. My house sits on the edge of town, tucked back from the street, with a big open yard and a long gravel driveway. No fences, no gate, just wide open space. And every Halloween, kids flood the neighborhood. They don't stick to sidewalks, they cut across lawns, stomp through flower beds, toss candy wrappers everywhere. I even had a group of teens TP my house one year. Another time, a couple of middle schoolers had a full-on silly string war on my front porch while I was watching from inside. Still, I try to be decent about it. I buy a few big bags of candy, I leave the porch light on, and I smile when kids come knocking, even if I'm gritting my teeth the whole time. My dog Rufus usually has a harder time with it. He's a big German shepherd, and the constant knocking and weird costumes drive him nuts. He spends most of Halloween barking at the door like we're under attack. Last year was worse than usual. It was Halloween night 2022, and it was already late, around 10:30. Most of the trick-or-treaters had come and gone. The neighborhood was quieting down. I was curled up on the couch in the den with Rufus, half watching a horror movie and half scrolling on my phone, trying to unwind. I'd just gotten comfortable when the doorbell rang. Rufus launched off the couch, barking like mad. I sighed, peeled myself up, and walked over to the front door. I figured it was some stragglers, maybe teenagers pulling a prank. I opened the door and froze. There, standing completely still on my porch, was someone in a full-body gorilla costume. Not a goofy one. This thing was detailed. Black fur that looked dirty and matted, long arms that hung unnaturally low, and a rubber face that looked less like a cartoon and more like something from a nightmare. The eyes were sunken, the mouth slightly open to reveal sharp yellowed teeth. It wasn't funny. It was disturbing. He didn't say anything, just held up a little plastic bag, like the kind you get from the dollar store. There were a few random candies in it, nothing fancy. I had tons of leftovers, so I dumped a big handful into his bag and gave a small wave. Still nothing. He didn't speak, didn't nod, didn't move. He just started digging through the bag, slowly examining the candy like he was inspecting it for poison or something. I stood there awkwardly, waiting for him to leave, but he didn't. He just stared down into the bag. Then suddenly, he looked up at me. And I mean looked. His eyes met mine through the holes in that mask, and I could tell he was staring right at me. Not blinking, not moving, just watching. You want more?" I asked, holding the bowl of candy out again. Nothing. He didn't respond. Didn't shake his head. Didn't give any sign that he even heard me. At that point, I was done. I gave him one last look and shut the door, locked it. Rufus was still growling behind me. I tried to brush it off, just some weirdo being creepy. Maybe an older kid messing around, whatever. I went back to the den, sat down, and tried to focus on my movie. That's when I heard something crash outside. It was loud, like something metal hitting the ground. It came from the backyard right outside the den window. Rufus jumped up again, growling deep in his throat. My heart was already pounding. I stood up slowly and walked over to the window. The backyard was mostly dark, but the motion sensor light on the back patio had clicked on. Something had knocked over the rake I'd left leaning against the side of the house. At first I figured maybe the wind did it, but the air was still. No breeze, no rustling leaves, just the kind of heavy, quiet stillness that makes your skin crawl. I slipped on my slides and stepped outside, keeping Rufus inside. I walked over and picked up the rake, setting it back where it had been. That's when I noticed the shed door was open, just slightly, maybe 4 or 5 inches. I hadn't opened that shed in days. It's a big one sitting near the back of the yard, and I use it to store my mower, some tools, and random outdoor junk. The light inside burned out years ago, and I never bothered replacing it. A cold feeling started creeping up my spine. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam was weak, but it was better than nothing. I walked across the yard, slowly, the gravel crunching under my feet. My eyes were locked on that door. I kept expecting it to swing open all the way. When I reached the shed, I paused. I could see something on one of the boxes just inside. I leaned in with the flashlight and felt my stomach drop. It was the gorilla mask, just sitting there, as if someone had taken it off and gently set it down. I stepped back, ready to shut the door and bolt, but something moved in the darkness. At the far end of the shed in the shadows, I saw him, the man in the costume. Except now, he wasn't wearing the mask. He was facing the back wall, standing perfectly still. His back was hunched and his hands were hanging limply at his sides. He looked old, not just in age, but in a weird, almost rotten way. His skin was pale and sagging, like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then, without making a sound, he turned his head. His neck cracked as it twisted unnaturally far, and his eyes locked onto mine. I stumbled backward, heart slamming in my chest. I turned and ran, sprinted back toward the house. I didn't look back. I didn't want to know if he was following me. I made it inside and slammed the door shut. Locked it. Deadbolt. Chain. Rufus was barking like crazy. A second later, I heard the shed door fly open, slamming into the side of the building with a loud bang. I didn't check the windows. I didn't try to peek. I just called the police. They showed up about 20 minutes later. I met them at the front door, breathless, trying to explain what happened. 2 officers took a look around the property, shining flashlights into the dark corners of my yard, checking the shed. But he was gone. No sign of him, no mask, no footprints, nothing. They told me they'd patrol the area and to call if anything else happened. Then they left. I sat in silence for a long time after that. I didn't finish the movie. I didn't even try to relax. I just went upstairs to bed with Rufus right behind me. But that wasn't the end. Sometime around 3 a.m., Rufus started growling, not barking, just a low, steady growl coming from the foot of my bed. I sat up, bleary-eyed, and followed his gaze. He was staring at the window. The curtains were closed, but something outside had triggered him. I got up and peeked through a gap. There was nothing there, just the yard, dark and empty. I tried to calm him down, but he kept growling like he knew something I didn't. Eventually, I pulled him up onto the bed with me and lay there, heart pounding, listening to every creak and thump the house made. The next morning, everything was normal. The shed door was shut. The yard was undisturbed. No sign of anything weird. It was like it never happened, but I know what I saw and I've been keeping the shed locked ever since.